It's Free Talk Live. You can join us here, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And as always, you may take control of the airwaves. That is the point here on Free Talk Live. That's what we do. And we've also got a chat room in which you can interact with other, well, I should say we have chat rooms in which you can interact with other Free Talk Live listeners. Head over to our Matrix server at chat.lrn.fm. That's actually a page that'll give you instructions on how to get to said server. Once again, that's chat.lrn.fm. As normal, Ian and Nobody in here on your Friday night, but Nobody, you brought a special guest co-host for us. Can you introduce him?
Yes, it's true. This is Lysander Knapp, otherwise known as Scott, and he's from the Conversations About Freedom podcast.
Oh, okay, cool.
And Scott reached out to me because he heard some of what I was saying about Black Lives Matter, and it kind of resonated with him, so he wanted me to come on his podcast and argue with his partner, and I did that and had a good time with it.
Yes.
Was this several weeks ago?
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually got the video of it. I'll be putting it up, or the audio of it at least. I'll be putting it up on Library sometime soon.
Okay, cool.
It's called Getting Woke with Nobody.
Yes, that's the name of that episode.
Nice. Well, Scott, welcome to the program. Now, are you from New Hampshire?
I am not. I'm actually from Indiana.
Really? And how did you, what brings you here?
Well, I wanted to come check out New Hampshire, and we were actually going to do a indie gun church camping trip this weekend, but things fell through. So I already had the weekend blocked out to do whatever. So I decided to head up here.
Just chilling in the Shire.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's cool. So is it your first time here?
Yes.
Okay.
It is my first time here.
Right on.
A Shire virgin.
Right in the middle of the wintertime, too. So is it? I mean, Indiana gets cold there, too, right?
It's actually colder there than it is here right now.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's. I believe it's in single digits right
now.
Wow.
Okay. Well, cool.
Wow.
So, I mean, was there something in particular that you wanted to discuss? I mean, you guys literally just walked in the door literally 30 seconds before we went on the air, so I didn't even have a chance to meet Scott before we went on the air. So I don't even know where we're going. I can bring something up. We can talk about it.
We didn't have anything in particular. It's just he's been listening for a long time to the podcast, and I find him always to have interesting things to say. So when I found out he was going to come up and spend a couple days with me, I was like, hey, I'll see if I can get you on the show.
Right on.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's always plenty of things in the news to talk about here tonight.
Absolutely.
Chris Wade was actually in just before you guys walked in the door.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he didn't get the memo that somebody else was going to be here, and he had brought in a story about qualified immunity. Apparently, there was some sort of Supreme Court case that has addressed this recently, and so that's what we were going to talk about. And
Yeah,
so
I think that's a great case.
Absolutely.
Have you been following that?
Yeah, I read about that yesterday. I've read about it several times, but I saw the Reason article yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's a great case.
Can you define for our listeners what qualified immunity is?
Qualified immunity is a doctrine of the Supreme Court that basically says that you can that a cop can only be found liable for civil damages if he's doing something which has already been ruled unconstitutional, like repeatedly. Okay.
Where he should have known better.
Right. But it's more than he should have known better. It's like he should have known better from reading a very narrowly defined set of precedents. Okay? So basically something can be obviously wrong, but if there's never been a case like it before, qualified immunity applies. So if you come up with something really horrible and really creative to do to people that nobody ever thought of before, you can't be held liable for that. And nobody can ever be found liable for it, because if you're not found liable for it, then the next guy to do it won't be found liable for it, because nobody's ever been found liable for it before.
And if you write a good enough report, you're going to get away with it as well.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, the story that you were reading about, was it about a prison warden? Was that the one?
Yeah, he left a inmate sleeping naked in raw sewage So it was, and nobody's ever done that before, and or nobody's ever been taken to court for doing that before. So the appeals court ruled that he couldn't be found liable, even though it was, just shocking. And the Supreme Court found that any reasonable person should have known that that was a violation of the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, even in the absence of some idiot having done it before and been found liable, more or less.
Well, that's not how their club works.
Well, it's not, and so it's a change to it's different from what they've been doing up till now, and so that's what makes it important.
Absolutely.
If you want to comment, you're welcome to join us here over at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And so actually, I'm still trying to find the story here because, like I said, I didn't actually have it. The piece here was Chris, so we may just have to look for that later and see, because the story you had talked about with raw sewage wasn't the one that I was just looking at just now.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we'll see what we can figure out. This one says that the federal court confirms that shackling an inmate during exercise is cruel and unusual punishment. And this had to do with qualified immunity because the warden who flouted the rule was not protected by it. So a federal court, in this case, ruled that shackling an inmate in full restraints while exercising qualified as cruel and unusual punishment, and that the warden is not protected by qualified immunity. This was the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit that confirmed that Angel Quiros, formerly the warden at Northern Correctional Institute in Connecticut, violated the man's Eighth Amendment rights when prison officials placed M.A. Edwards, this is the prisoner, in restraints during his exercise time over a 6-month period. Specifically, he had his hands cuffed with leg irons on his ankles and a chain tether securing those two sets of restraints to one another. And they said that in 2014, a lower court gave the warden qualified immunity, the legal doctrine that protects government officials from certain sorts of lawsuits if the alleged misbehavior was not clearly established in a prior case law. In practical terms, this means courts often acknowledge that a civil servant infringed on a defendant's rights, but without a court precedent, they still award that civil servant protection from accountability. And the case initially followed that pattern, but the U.S. District Court for Connecticut ruled that while every inmate has the right to recreate free from restraints, this was not a clearly established right. However, the Second Circuit countermanded that on appeal, allowing the case to go to a jury, which sided with the prisoner in 2018. The district court then turned around and vacated that decision, a fairly uncommon move, maintaining that the warden only had enough information to know of the violation for a short period of time as opposed to the entire 6 months. Then appealed again. The bureaucrat raised the same concern, which the court rejected, citing his own testimony. The warden also challenged the idea that an Eighth Amendment violation occurred at all, arguing that the plaintiff was not deprived of the ability to attend outdoor recreation and to get fresh air and walk, but the Second Circuit wouldn't have it. The judge wrote in the case, quote, "We have described the right at issue as that to some opportunity to exercise, and we cannot determine as a matter of law that the jury erred in finding Edwards' limited ability to shuffle around in full restraints while breathing fresh air constituted meaningful exercise." So they actually ruled in favor of the prisoner in that case. The warden also argued that safety justified the restraints, which undermined constitutional claims. But the jury was entitled to disagree. Wrote the judge, the safety justification was undermined by testimony from the prisoner, credited by the jury that corrections officers would not always employ the most restrictive shackling when they were moving him out of his cell and around the facility. So basically saying they actually put him in greater restriction when they took him out for exercise than when they had him moving about the facility.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the qualified immunity that came up here when I looked on Reason. We'll see if we can figure out what you guys are talking about here with the sewage story. Your calls and thoughts are welcome. 603-283-6160. This is Free Talk Live. 6160. If you want to take control of the airwaves, you can do that We're starting out with qualified immunity as a topic now. Actually, it looks like the story you were referencing, Nobody, goes all the way back to November. So that's why I couldn't find it. I was looking for something that was more recent, like this month.
I saw it yesterday, but
yeah,
so it's new to me.
Apparently, it was new to the Penguin as well. Chris, who is going to be in here tonight, but he had this story to talk about, and it sounded really interesting because the Supreme Court has actually made a ruling regarding qualified immunity. So this is a different case than what we were just talking about, which is actually a recent story by Billy Binion over at Reason.com, and this one is about a warden at what appears to be a Connecticut jail. I don't know if it's a federal. It must be Northern Correctional Institute in Somers, Connecticut, who was shackling a man, cuffing his hands and putting leg irons on his ankles and then tethering both of those restraints to each other.
So like they used to send us to court.
I don't think they tethered them together, did they?
They had us both, or at least when we went to court together with the trespass of 12, they had the Velcro belt on both of us because we managed to get my belt off while we were in the van. I remember that.
And a special guest co-host here with Ian and Nobody is Scott. He's the co-host of a different show, which is called Conversations About Freedom. You host it with a guy named Moral Bob.
Yes, that's the name he goes by.
And this is, you're saying, a brand new podcast. This doesn't even have a website yet.
Does not even have a website.
Yeah.
Does not even have a website. You can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
How many episodes are you into this?
I started, actually. He had the podcast before I got onto it. I started on episode 14.
Okay.
And episode 15 featured Pope Nobody over here.
Okay, so where are you at? Like 20 something right now?
25.
Okay,
right
almost a half a year. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
That's great.
So
check them out. And so, again, the qualified immunity aspect of this prison story, or the first prison story we're telling you about, with the warden who was trying to claim qualified immunity because he was basically saying that he didn't know that he could treat his prisoners like this, where it's basically during exercise time, they were shackling him down. So all he could do was essentially shuffle during so-called exercise. And Scott, you were telling us
I've done the Thoracian shuffle. It's not. It's not the least bit recreational.
Off the air, I did mention that I before, back when I was a statist, was a correctional officer, and it was commonplace to take offenders who were in segregation and shackle them exactly like that, cuff their ankles and hands and chain them together, and take them out into the cages with a single basketball hoop. And let him just walk around in a circle for an hour, like
just to tease him.
Yeah,
like there's a basketball hoop. You could be playing basketball, but no, we're not going to let you.
Oh, they would do this even when in the winter. They just take him out in the cold
and leave him there.
Leave him there for an hour. They give him a coat.
Wow.
But since they're cuffed up, they would just throw it over their shoulders.
Wow.
And they just let him walk around for an hour.
What was this? A state prison? You said, or a jail?
It was a prison.
Yes. So these are long-term
offenders.
Prisoners. Okay. And how long did you work there?
I shouldn't say offender. That's the term we used when we were there. They were prisoners.
Yeah.
They didn't offend anyone. Most of them didn't harm anyone.
Really? Were most of them there for nonviolent offenses?
I would say over 95% of them were there for nonviolent.
Wow. And where was this? What state? Can you say?
I don't care. I'll throw them out there. It was Correctional Industrial Facility in Pendleton, Indiana.
And was this a government run or a private?
Yes, it's government run. But we have private prisons. We have Geo Corporation or whoever.
And they're like almost as bad, if not worse, right? Like than the government prisons. What have you heard about those?
I didn't work at a Geo facility. All I know is at one point they brought, and this was a year before I hired on at the prison, they brought offenders from Arizona and put them in a Geo facility in Newcastle, and they rioted because, well, one thing, they're from Arizona, and they never got to see their families halfway across the country. So,
well, feds do that all the time, right? Federal inmates get shuffled, usually
diesel therapy.
They purposefully take them away from their families. They move them as far away from their loved ones as they possibly can.
They call it diesel therapy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's horrendous practice.
It is horrible. And the state facilities have such strict visiting room policies that often when people will come to visit, like if they had a family member from Arizona come and visit, if they were out of dress code, they would say, well, you can't come in today.
Yeah.
And they just send them packing.
After they traveled however long and
all the way across the country to spend an hour with their family member.
Yep.
Oh, your shorts are too short. Sorry.
Sick.
That happened to Lynn Albright, I think, at least
more
once.
than once.
It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. 603-283-6160 if you've been on the inside of a facility as somebody who worked there or somebody who is being kept there and you want to comment, you're welcome to join us here at 603-283-6160. So just continue briefly here on that first story from Reason about the warden who was not given qualified immunity after an appeal, of course. The first court did give it to him. The denial of qualified immunity does not mean that a defendant has been found guilty. It merely gives the plaintiff the right to sue. In other words, an official awarded the legal protection is thus spared from facing the possibility of accountability, not accountability itself. So there's just, it's off the table. Any kind of potential harm to or financial harm to the person who did the actual damage to this individual, in this case, shackling them during exercise time.
And they're not only spared that, though, they're spared even having the story told publicly in court where it can be recorded. Because, they dismissed the case right off the bat for that before testimony has been heard. At least if you go through the whole trial and people think that, well, what you did is horrible, they can, like, put that trial on YouTube or something. And or put it on blast where people will see it.
The jury reasonably determined upon sufficient evidence that the warden knowingly violated the prisoner's clearly established right to meaningful exercise under the circumstances and lacked a sufficient justification for doing so. So the jury's finding stood on appeal. So that's a little bit of good news. But apparently the better news is here from November, also coming from Reason.com. Ilya Somin writing that the Supreme Court has rejected qualified immunity as a defense for the first time in years. Now, is this as good as it sounds on its face? We'll find that out coming up here in moments. It does say that the case doesn't make any change in legal doctrine, but it may be intended to send a message to the lower courts. We'll tell you more about what happened in this particular case as well, where the Supreme Court issued a decision rejecting a law enforcement officer's qualified immunity defense. The case was Taylor versus Riojas, and it was the first such Supreme Court ruling since 2004. Just to give you some idea of how long between these guys even ruling on a similar case in some cases.
Yeah, and it's been that long since they ruled right, and like even a stopped clock is right twice a day. So just to give you a point of comparison.
603-283-6160. We'll continue here. Of course, your calls and thoughts are welcome on qualified immunity or whatever happens to be on your mind. Coming up, we'll also tell you about the hug tent. Yeah, it's as bad as it sounds. It's Free Talk
I'd
Live.
go to a hug tent.
Nobody and Scott here in the studio tonight to get into the story that I'd originally intended to talk about here this evening, thanks to thinkpenguin.com, where Chris Wade is normally with us. You're sitting in for him tonight,
Yes,
Scott.
I am.
And he brought this one in tonight from Reason.com's Ilya Somin about the Supreme Court in a case Taylor versus Riojas, where they rejected a law enforcement officer's qualified immunity defense, the first such Supreme Court ruling since 2004, which alone makes it significant. Now, whether the court will take a more forceful action to curb qualified immunity in future cases remains to be seen. Qualified immunity is the notorious doctrine under which law enforcement officers and many other government officials are immune from civil lawsuits for violating constitutional and statutory rights in the course of performing their duties unless they have violated quote-unquote clearly established law. Now, courts have interpreted clearly established so narrowly that officers routinely get away with horrendous abuses merely because no federal court in their area has previously decided a case with essentially identical facts. So if the officer doesn't abuse the person in a similar way to a previous officer who was ruled against in court, then he gets qualified immunity.
That sounds great. So basically, the way I understand it is they just have to be really creative about how they torture someone. And as long as it's never been done in that way before, they can get away with it.
That's what it sounds like. In this case, Taylor versus Riojas, a 7-1 majority. And they concluded in the Supreme Court that the lower court had gone too far in granting qualified immunity to prison officials in an egregious case where they subjected a prisoner to horrific treatment. So now they're going to share an excerpt from, I believe, the majority decision in this case. So here's what they wrote. Trent Taylor is an inmate in the custody of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Taylor alleges that for 6 full days in September of 2013, corrections officers confined him in a pair of shockingly unsanitary cells. The first cell was covered nearly floor to ceiling in massive amounts of feces all over the floor, ceiling, window, walls, and even packed inside the water faucet. Fearing that his food and water would be contaminated, obviously, Taylor did not eat or drink for nearly 4 days. Correctional officers then moved him to a second, frigidly cold cell, which was equipped with only a clogged drain in the floor to dispose of bodily wastes. Taylor held his bladder for over 24 hours, but he eventually and involuntarily relieved himself. God, this is disgusting. I want to apologize to our listeners for sharing this with you. You're not supposed to. We're not supposed to pander to the lowest common denominator in what we talk about on Free Talk Live, but this is the actual news. Okay, so like
this really happened.
Yeah, we're not talking about poop things because we want to gross you out. This actually happened to a person. So he relieved himself, causing the drain to overflow, which then made raw sewage spill across the floor because the cell. Oh man, it just keeps getting worse. It lacked a bunk. So he didn't have anywhere he could, like, sit to escape the fetid fecal matter coming out of this drain. He was confined also without clothing. So he was left to sleep naked in raw sewage. The Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit properly held that such conditions of confinement violate the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. Thank goodness. But based on its assessment that the law wasn't clearly established, that prisoners couldn't be housed in cells teeming with human waste for only 6 days, the court concluded that the prison officials responsible for his confinement did not have fair warning that their specific acts were unconstitutional. So this Court of Appeals ruled that the confinement was absolutely cruel and unusual, but because the officers in charge weren't really aware of the court cases about cruel and unusual punishment, and this didn't exactly match up with any of them, therefore qualified immunity.
Yeah, so basically the idea there and the thing that's horrendous about that is if you do something to a prisoner that's so horrible and creative that nobody ever thought of it before, you get a free pass.
That's what the Fifth Circuit was saying. Now, the court finally, it's again in a 7-1 ruling, Supreme Court ruled that the Fifth Circuit erred in granting the officers qualified immunity on this basis. Quote, qualified immunity shields an officer from suit when she makes a decision that, even if constitutionally deficient, reasonably misapprehends the law governing the circumstances she confronted. So saying again that they're given protection if they don't really understand what they're doing. Like, okay, they made a mistake.
But see, as far as I'm concerned, still there should be a judgment in that case, and maybe the officer should then have the right to sue his institution and make them pay the damages based on you didn't train me properly.
That's a good point.
You know?
But no
I would
reason
still like to see the officer charged there.
Well,
otherwise the taxpayers are paying for it.
That's the thing. And of course, you can't impose a criminal charge on an institution in any meaningful way. You can't put them in jail. You can't execute them.
But no reasonable correctional, again, back to the Supreme Court's ruling, they say no reasonable correctional officer could have concluded that under the extreme circumstances of this case, that it was constitutionally permissible to house Taylor in such deplorably unsanitary conditions for such an extended period of time. Confronted with the particularly egregious facts of this case, any reasonable officer should have realized that Taylor's conditions of confinement offended the Constitution.
Thank you.
There you go. It took literally a room full of raw sewage including it being packed in the actual faucets and spigots.
Yeah, so he can't even drink.
Can't do
He can't
anything.
even have a drink of water.
This is absolutely horrifying. It took that and then a second room with raw sewage bubbling up from the grate in the floor, which was the only way he had to relieve himself. No actual bed in which he could escape from it, and just freezing cold conditions. That was enough to finally make the Supreme Court say, okay, you don't get qualified immunity. But that's what it took.
Yeah, and that's something where if somebody told me that happened to them in a third world prison, I would be astounded by that. I mean, except I wouldn't be, because I expect these people to be fucking.
Oh my God, you can't say that on the air.
I'm sorry.
So
the funny thing is he
was
all concerned that he was going to be the one to do that, and it was me.
What were you trying to say there?
I don't know. I completely lost it.
That's okay.
Well, one thing I can say is it doesn't matter. It's the institution that's the problem. All this is going to do, this court ruling is going to do, is make the officers better at hiding their atrocities. They're still going to do it.
Of course they are.
Yes.
They're just going to write their reports different.
The court is right. Now, this is back to Reason and their assessment of the case. The court is right to conclude the facts here were particularly egregious and that any reasonable officer should have been able to understand this kind of abuse violates the Eighth Amendment. You don't have to be a great legal theorist to figure out that forcing a prisoner to live amidst raw sewage and feces for days on end, let alone an hour, is cruel and unusual. At the same time, I mean, it's one thing if you're in a normal
even the
cell.
Phrase cruel and unusual, it's like, you mean if you do something really cruel all the time, it becomes okay?
You just got to change the definition of cruel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if you're in a cell that's in normal shape and the toilet overflows and you got to deal with a cleanup situation. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But to be put into a cell where there's already sewage all over the place, that's a serious violation of any kind of human decency. 603-283-6160. But there's more to the story here, and we'll share that with you, and you can share your thoughts with us. Whatever is on your mind goes here on Free Talk Live. And we'll talk about the hug tent coming up. It's not a good hug tent. Free Talk Live. The number here, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online anytime you want. Go to freetalklive.com. We have a social media website. You were just telling me off the air, Scott, that you have been banned from all social medias?
Well, most of them.
What happened?
The only I honestly, my account that my pseudonym I use on my podcast, Lysander Knapp, I had an account that was Lysander Knapp. I was friends with nobody, and the day after the election, it just disappeared. I don't know why.
Didn't get a notice.
I didn't even get a notice. It just.
And
I
this
went
was
to
on which site?
Facebook. Fascist book. Yeah.
And what else did you lose? Twitter? Did you lose anything else?
I've lost my Twitter account. I lost like 3 Twitter accounts.
Why?
Hate speech.
Really?
Hate speech.
What did they tell you which post it was? Did they at least tell you like
it was over a year ago? I couldn't really remember, but it wasn't hate speech.
Okay.
I got kicked off Facebook for hate speech one time because I said, every time I see a bunch of Black Lives Matter do something stupid, it's a bunch of crackers. Is what I said. And they kicked me off for that.
Hate speech. Okay.
That was hate speech.
So you've been kicked off of all these social medias. I'd like to invite you to check ours out. We actually launched a Mastodon instance, which you can go to social.freetalklive.com. And Mastodon basically acts like Twitter. It does everything that a Twitter does, except without the Twitter.
Kick you off.
I have one.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
You have a Mastodon account.
Yeah, I have a social.freetalklive.
Excellent.
Nice.
And what is your account? What's your account so people can follow you there?
It's at Lysander Knapp.
Okay. Lysander N-A-P?
Yes,
Cool.
N-A-P.
Check him out there.
Non-aggression principle.
Social.freetalklive.com. Let's go to Kirby. He's on the line in Indiana. I guess you guys come from the same area. You know each other.
Hello, Kirby.
What's up, Scott? I'm so glad you got through Nazi-occupied Germany.
You mean New York?
Same thing.
Exactly.
New York, Germany.
I've never seen so many cops on the highway as I did in New York.
Really?
It was.
Did you go the northern direction or through the city?
I went by. I can't think of all the.
Well, you either go through New York City or you go around New York City.
I did not go through New York City.
Okay.
Coming from Indiana, you wouldn't go through New York City because you're coming from the west.
I went the northern route, but I felt
here.
like I was in that state forever, and I was seeing a police officer in the median probably every 2 miles.
Wow.
It was ridiculous.
It actually wasn't. I was actually surprised. We didn't see that many because we drove through upper state New York, kind of, or like mid and then sort of upper through Albany to get here on the way back, and didn't see more than 4 of them or something.
Wow.
Like that.
Yeah, I saw a lot. They had a lot out today. Maybe they were on I can't think of what they call a project.
Mm-hmm.
They call those things projects.
Yeah. So anyway, 603-283-6160. Kirby, what do you want to share tonight?
First of all, Ian, that story you just shared was extremely disturbing. Thank you for it, but it was very disturbing.
It was hard to read.
Yeah.
I mean, I like.
And I sent Scott and nobody a copy of the Indiana statute on Telegram.
What statute? I'm sorry.
Qualified immunity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Nice.
I think it's worth pointing that out here. Like, qualified immunity is a statute. It's something that the government politicians passed to protect their buddies in the bureaucracy. So it could be repealed. I mean, people are always looking to the courts to interpret it differently, but if the politicians actually cared about this issue, they would just repeal it.
Isn't there a move afoot in New Hampshire to repeal our qualified immunity statute? I believe there is.
I have something I got to say about that and I'm going to put the Libertarian candidate in Indiana on the spot here. I went to one of his events.
Which one? Is this the governor guy?
He was a candidate for governor.
Didn't he get more than like 10% in the vote or something?
He did. He got like 14%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a lot.
Okay.
That's because our governor messed up.
Nobody can do that.
All right, so call him out. What do you want to call him out for?
I went to one of his events and I asked him to his face. I was like, what do you think about qualified immunity? Let's get rid of it. And his answer to me was, it does not need to be repealed. It needs to be redefined.
That's insane.
And I'm like, to me, I'm like, that is not that's not
how
a
do these
libertarian answer.
Right. How do these people keep getting into these nominations for these top spot libertarian positions?
Well, the answer is that basically, if you are absolutely consistent in your libertarianism, you're going to get a very small segment of the vote, and you're not going to be able to do anything. So sometimes, because you won't get elected.
I don't agree. I mean, you're not going to get elected anyway. The point of running a libertarian campaign is to communicate.
In theory, if you don't factor in the fact that the elections are rigged.
Well, then you should factor that in, number one. But not only that, but
not
only
everybody
are they
believes
rigged,
that.
but the media will ignore you. So it doesn't, even if the elections weren't rigged, the media doesn't want you to be able to communicate because their buddies in the Republican and Democrat parties don't want that to happen. So the media carries the water.
Well, that's part of the rigging of the election. And the thing is, a lot of people are still in denial over that, and that's one of the reasons I encourage people to get involved with the Libertarian Party and work on campaigns, because getting cheated twice working for Ron Paul did wonders for me becoming an anarchist, because once that denial was broken and I saw how rigged everything was, I was like, there is no political solution, because they have made peaceful evolution impossible. And so therefore the only thing left is either revolution or wait for it to collapse.
Okay. Scott, do you think that nobody is correct here? Would this candidate in Indiana, what was his name?
Donald Rainwater.
Would Donald Rainwater have done worse if he opposed qualified immunity and was more consistently libertarian, with his viewpoints?
In Indiana, I absolutely believe so.
He would have done worse.
You would. You could go through his social media feeds, and every 10 or 15 posts would be, well, how do you feel about police? Well, how do you feel about police? And we're a heavily Republican state. And if he would have come out and said, let's get rid of qualified immunity, I guarantee you the cop suckers out there would have
Kirby, what do you think about this guy? This
you got to
libertarian.
go for the bootlicker vote.
What do you think about this libertarian candidate?
He'd have been run out of town on a rail if he'd have got anywhere close. What Scott said is right. This is a very Republican, authoritarian state. While we might have some of the most lax gun laws in the state, they have found numerous ways around those laws.
We have a red flag law. The Jake Laird law. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very repressed state. I mean, think about it. We just got the right to buy alcohol in a liquor store 2 years ago on Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah. They have lots of blue laws, and you still cannot buy chilled alcohol in a gas station because it's arbitrary like that.
Nope. That's
So
right.
wait,
there ain't going to be no chilling.
Hold on. Was it? Wait. Just to clarify, are you saying that you couldn't buy alcohol just in liquor stores on Sunday? That you could buy it at like
couldn't buy it anywhere.
Convenience store?
You couldn't buy it anywhere. You could go to a restaurant and order a drink.
That was
you
it.
Couldn't go in and buy alcohol to take home.
So now you can. Now you can actually go to a
Saturday.
convenience store on a Sunday and buy alcohol, and that just happened 2 years ago.
Yes,
And
I believe
then
it's still restricted to like certain
Yeah,
hours.
because they're only open from noon till 8.
And states like that, one group of people that always lobbies for that kind of law is the bar owners. Because then instead of getting drunk at home, if you forget about that and you're unprepared, you got to go pay 5 times as much for a drink in their bar. Yeah. So they love that.
Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
Which is why every other storefront downtown is a bar or a restaurant.
And so I have no proof that this is, but I have a little conspiracy theory about that whole fight in Indiana. I don't want to go too deep into Indiana politics here, but there was a gas station in Indiana called Ricker's, and owned by someone named Jay Ricker, and he was big on the fight to get chilled alcohol allowed to be sold at convenience stores. And suddenly Jay Ricker was bought out by Giant Eagle, and now all the Rickers are called Get-Go's. And Giant Eagle, is a mega corporation that I'm pretty sure is in bed with the government.
Sure.
And that's basically how they worked it out. They said, "Hey, we'll give you some money. You go away."
Wow.
Yeah. See, the big
I have
corporations,
no proof of that, but that's my theory.
The big corporations have all become part of the military-industrial regulatory complex.
Oh, yeah.
It's
sick. Thank you, Kirby, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. That allows you to take control of the airwaves here on Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the program here. As always, you can join us at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, it's Ian.
Nobody.
Scott.
You guys were just talking off the air about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and made me want to go and check and see what the price was. Bitcoin is up right now, up 4% in just the last 24 hours, more than 4%. It's up to $38,710. So
wow.
Not quite to the all-time high territory, but getting darn close.
Didn't Bitcoin die a little while ago when it fell from 42 to something?
It fell down to like 30.
Yeah, I remember its death was reported again. They were having a funeral for it. I guess that was premature.
Indeed. Indeed it was. So I just thought I'd give you an update on that. Of course, you can bring up anything you want. Coming up, the hug tent. That sounds like fun, but no, it's a disturbing, dystopian, crazy thing. We'll tell you about it coming up here. But first, we got Joe. He's in Michigan to kick things off here in hour number 2. Joe, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, I was listening to you guys talk about that prisoner that they had in feces and his, own urine and stuff like that. If you did that to a dog, they'd arrest. They'd throw you in probably throw you in a mental hospital or something.
They sure would. There was just a story in the news this week about somebody who was living in a trailer park or wherever, and they had like 30 dogs in cages that were all in, rolling in their own feces because they weren't let out. That's where they were living, and that person is absolutely being charged with animal cruelty.
And I'll tell you what, even in an anarchist society, I might bitch smack a guy who did that. I reserve the
you're
right.
going to do that to your fellow human being, and then, well, I'm a cop or whatever, or I'm a prison guard or whatever. Give me a break, man.
Yeah.
Well, that lets you know exactly
to,
what the state thinks of you.
Yep.
They don't respect us. We're just we're just worker bees to pay for their wars, and
you are scum beneath
I'm not going to
their
get
feet.
off on a tangent, but
You're not wrong, Joe. I appreciate that. What else do you want to share tonight? Go ahead.
oh no, I just stuff like that, and the media you've noticed that you go on social media how the attitude, you don't hear about police violence anymore and all this because it was a political thing. Mainly they were using it.
Mhm.
But
You're
it's
saying
still
that
out there,
when you say you don't hear about
it does
police
happen.
when you say you don't hear about police violence, you mean you're comparing what you're seeing in the news now to the sort of frenzy of coverage the media gave police abuse in the summertime of 2020? Because
Yeah,
it did
now
get
it's gone.
coverage.
It's we had an election. Now we're just going to ignore it. It's
Right.
like
now that
back
Biden's in,
the,
all the police abuse has ended.
Well, it's their police abuse now.
Yeah.
It's their police abuse,
after
and that's okay.
It was back in the day. I don't know how. I mean, back in the day, when after Clinton was elected, all the homeless people disappeared. But that's all they talked about for forever. I was young back then, but still, I remember. It's our media is the problem. They're the biggest problem in this country because they're not honest, and they're just going to police violence, police abuse. There's not going to be any real reform. If anything happens, it'll just be nipping at the edges or whatever. But
Yeah, there was an interesting couple of memes I saw today in the Tales of a Libertarian Telegram chat room where I don't know if you heard about the Democrats and the media is referring to kids being taken into custody in the immigration detention centers, and under Trump they of course were saying kids in
they're
cages.
Concentration camps. Yeah.
And they are. But
now
they're now the terminology
facilities
is overflow facilities. The kids are being held in quote overflow facilities, which of course means the exact same thing is going on. It's just being described in a different manner.
Yeah, and it's that way across the media. It is not this reporter or that reporter doing it. The other thing that you'll notice is how often you hear the same words coming out of every talking head's mouth. Like they're getting talking points from central facilities. It's clear.
Well, with this overflow facility
Orwell,
thing,
man. This is 1984.
It really is so creepy walking around
like
out
all
there.
government projects, it's years behind schedule, but yes, it's 1984.
Government often misnames their projects, like overflow facility, or a good example is a few weeks back, the CDC shielding program. Which are just concentration camps renamed.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
right.
we reported on that.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
Yeah, they're
program.
still rolling out. That one they're just talking about right now. That's in the planning stages.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
if you don't think Nazi Germany is going to come to the United States, look at your very own CDC.
Yeah, and then go and read a
the,
book called "It Can't Happen
The Patriot
Here."
Act, man.
Oh, the Patriot Act. Yeah, well, that was
they
just
called it the Patriot
first
Act,
step.
but they're just secret courts, and they're spying on everybody now.
Yeah, if you thought the courts were secret after the Patriot Act, try them now. Now you can't even get a trial. We just saw a guy today, an old friend of the show. Actually, I think Bud was on the show a couple of times, so longtime listeners may remember him. We had a guy in here. He's a New Hampshire, native, friend of the show, and he was facing some just absolutely horrific, trumped-up charges. His own mother had accused him of inappropriately doing things around his own child, his own stepchild, and being naked or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was like the kid saw him naked getting into the shower or something.
It was something. They made it sound so terrible, and he was facing felony child abuse charges over what his own mother
I remember this.
had alleged. And he was out on our front porch today, so he was hanging out with you, and I'm like, I hadn't seen him in a couple of years since these charges hit him, and I said, did those charges get dropped? How's it going? What's going on with these BS? Because it sounded like BS to me, knowing Bud. And he said, that he beat the charges, but what he meant when he said he beat them was that they did drop the child abuse charges, and they got him to take a guilty plea for simple assault. So he didn't get any sort of, sex conviction, so that's good. But he did take a guilty plea to simple assault. And I was like, well, why did that happen? Why did you take the plea? Because he felt like he could beat this case. That there was no evidence against him. It was just this crazy mother of his that brought these charges, basically. And so he said the reason why he took the guilty plea was because they'd held him in jail for 10 months pre-trial. And what they told him was that they don't know when the trial's going to be due to COVID. So basically, he could sit in jail until whenever it was that they decided, indefinitely, until they decided to have a trial finally for him, which, again, it had already been 10 months of his life. And so they came to him and said, you can take this plea deal to this simple assault. I think it was a misdemeanor, simple assault charge, and we'll let you out
today.
Yep.
Wow.
Or you can just sit here and we'll get you the trial as soon as we can, but we don't know when that's going to be due to COVID.
Now he's a criminal for life.
Well, he was already convicted.
Okay. He was already a criminal. But, but the thing is, and that is not new. I mean, I was in jail with a guy, happened to be a black guy, and a lot of times, a lot of these most egregious things are happening to black guys.
This happens to everybody.
It happens to everybody, but black folks get it worse. I think.
I mean, there's no doubt about it, but I mean, I don't want to take away from what happened. This guy had to spend 10 months of his life behind bars for something he didn't do.
Yeah.
He didn't hit a kid, but he pled guilty to hitting a kid.
Yeah.
Just to get out of jail.
Yeah. But the guy I was in jail with, they said, well, if you plead guilty, then you do 30 days. If you don't plead guilty, your trial is scheduled in 45 days.
Yep.
So you do 15 days pre-trial, more than you would have done if you just pled guilty. So, of course, they plead guilty, and then that gets hung over their head for the rest of their life. So that's a way of picking and choosing the winners and losers in society.
Joe, thanks for the call tonight. I do appreciate hearing from you. Our phone lines are open for you if you want to call in at 603-283-6160. Whether you want to talk about a crazy jail story. I mean, there's no shortage. I mean, you used to work inside a prison. I'm sure we could probably spend the rest of the show talking about prison stories. So if you want to talk about those things, that's fine too. Also, now elderly homes are a lot like, more so like prisons than they've ever been. And we'll tell you about the Hug Tent coming up here and why it is not a fun hug tent.
Their suffering is intense.
Yeah. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live. You can dial in here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live brought to you by Fork Fest 2021. Coming up June 28th through July 4th of this year, you are invited to Rogers Campground, the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. We were actually just talking about this off the air too. Scott, you said you're planning on coming to Fork Fest.
Absolutely. I was speaking to my wife about that today.
Excellent.
We are coming up.
It's a great excuse to check out New Hampshire during the summertime, which is somewhat warm here at that time. Although bring a hoodie for the nights, because even in the North Country it gets a little chilly during the nighttime hours during the summer. So you'll still want to dress warm for that part. But go to forkfest.party. It'll be basically the second week of summer, June 28th through July 4th, and it is a decentralized libertarian camping festival, meaning that there's no one who is in charge of this festival.
Nobody's in charge.
Right, there's not a board of directors. There's not an organizer. There's just each person that comes to the campground and then what they want to contribute to it, which could just be hanging out. It could be creating an event. It could be, I know a couple of our co-hosts are going to be putting on a musical concert. Their rock band, FUD, is going to be back for its second year in a row. And the guys from AnyPay are going to do an even more epic dome this year, apparently. They've got a big plan to do a major upgrade. They already had an amazing dome the last 2 years, and they're taking it to the next level. I don't know what that means, but I'm excited. they're actually renting it out to people that want to rent the dome, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So if you're a stripper and you'd like to come to Forkfest, all expenses paid, send an email to stripper@electnobody.com.
Right. Now, is that only female strippers or?
If I can find it, the thing is, there's going to be a lot more business for female strippers than male strippers because
probably, yeah.
You know, if you ask one of the guys at Porkfest to take his clothes off, he'll probably do it for free. If you're a girl, and so
they're not hard to find.
But if I was able to find enough females to like justify taking the tent for a week, then I would be fine with having a male night.
I suspect they're not willing to rent it for the whole week, but maybe if you had enough money, they would do it.
You could have a drag show too.
I know they want to do their own kind of things there as well. So
okay, I was thinking they were going to rent the second tent out for the whole time, or the second.
I don't know what they're
dome.
going to do with the second dome. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm
See,
not
that's
sure
what I thought you were talking about.
I don't know if this is a whole new dome or like an upgrade to the old. I don't know what it is exactly that they've got. So
okay.
I know they're working on something.
I'll get them on the horn and
I'm sure it'll be
out.
pretty cool, though. Forkfest.party, June 28th through July 4th. You can get your RV site, your campsite, or your motel room from Rogers Campground, and we will look forward to seeing you there. So I mentioned this hug tent, and yeah,
that sounds fun.
It's not good. It does. It sounds fun. It sounds like something people need. Like, you know, people need contact. They need human contact, and unfortunately, no, it is the dystopian version of a hug tent. And I don't know if you've seen this photo, Scott. I'm going to try to describe what this looks like. There is a woman who presumably is one of the people that is inside this Colorado elderly home, a nursing home. Her name is Chloe McDonald. She's 84 years old, and her not her husband, but I think it's her son. I'm not sure. It actually may be her husband. Anyway, somebody who is it's her son. Her son is holding hands with her, but he is behind a plastic sheet that is so like crinkled you can't even see through it very well. So you can't even see the person that is behind the sheet particularly well. He's got his arms inside of
some sleeves.
His arm is not only okay, so there's actually plastic sleeves on his arm. So like on his own clothing, he's inside a plastic sleeve. And then his plastic sleeved arms are then inside of plastic sleeves themselves.
He's double gloving.
He is double plastic sleeve, double gloved, as he is then quote unquote holding hands with his 84-year-old mother.
Wow.
Through this plastic and you can see it from here, nobody. You can see how fuzzy looking this plastic is.
I can't even see what's behind it except a shape.
Right. You're right. I mean, and plus the guy's also masked. So you can't even see his face. You can't see if he's smiling. You would think that if he was behind a plastic sheet. I mean, this guy is completely behind a sheet. It's not like he's like, hey, it's not like the sheet is hanging down right in front of him and there's, 3 feet to the left, it's open. There's no opening here. It's just a full sheet conceals this son from this woman. And he is just sitting there on his knees. He's trying to make eye contact with her, but I don't think that you can see anyone very well through this thing. So he's got a mask on. You can't see us. It's just so disturbing.
See, if I was old, and I realize that if I was old, I would be in a great deal more jeopardy from COVID. But if I was given the choice of being able to hug my son or daughter versus you can not hug your son or daughter except through this tent and you're going to live 10 years longer, I would be like, why would I want to live 10 years longer like that?
This isn't living.
No,
yeah,
not at all.
I will hug my kid, and if I die, I die.
Yep.
2 years ago, this would have been called a kink. Now it's called visiting grandma.
Yeah, it's like the latex people. I never understood that kink. The gimp. You know, he's like the transparent gimp is what he is.
It had been at least 8 months since she touched her 77-year-old husband, Len. This is Lydia Hartman. Now, it's a different woman than is in the photo here, but it had been 8 months at least since she touched her husband, who has dementia and has been at an assisted living facility in suburban Denver for the last year. This is in Louisville, Colorado. On Wednesday, she got a small taste of what life was like before the coronavirus pandemic, sort of. This, by the way, is the AP reporting. Thanks to a quote-unquote hug tent set up outside of Juniper Village in Louisville, Hartman got to squeeze her husband, albeit while wearing plastic sleeves and separated by a 4-millimeter thick clear plastic barrier.
It's like Amish dating, except they use plastic instead of a bundling sheet.
And calling this a clear plastic barrier is a real stretch. It's not clear at all. She said,
was she really hugging him or just the plastic?
I mean, she's touching plastic.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be able to feel some warmth, perhaps, through
Maybe.
this plastic. Maybe. She says, I really needed it. I really needed it. It meant a lot to me, and it's been a long, long time. Hartman, who fractured 2 vertebrae, she's 75 years old, by the way, and could no longer take care of herself or take care of her husband by herself, said she thought he was a little confused, but that it was important for them to embrace again. She said, we've been trying to do it for a long time. It felt good. I kept hitting his glasses when I hugged him, though, and he got cold. Although the setup wasn't ideal, she said, at least you can do something, and it's important. And that's how sad this whole situation is. This means something to people.
Did they ask her if she would have preferred to take the risk? I doubt it, because it was the AP and they're part of the establishment.
I don't think it's allowed. He's at a
But
facility.
did they ask her if she would have preferred it? If I was the reporter, my first question would be, given the choice, would you take a long life like this or a short life with real hugs?
That would have been the most interesting question to ask.
I think so.
The number here is 603-283-6160. If you want to answer that question, if you're up in your years and you can put yourself in this situation, what would happen? What would your choice be? 603-283-6160 if you could even make such a choice. And I suspect the facility wouldn't even allow it.
It wouldn't.
There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live. We invite you to join us here, 603-283-6160. We're talking about what I would call dystopian hug tent. Hugging's normally a very human thing to do. It's something that allows people to connect physically together and share some warmth and share some love and appreciation for their fellow man or lady.
Give me some sugar, baby.
And now all of that warmth, all of that wonder has been just sucked right out of the experience by the new dystopian, crazy medical authoritarian police state that we are surrounded by, where now at apparently in Louisville, Colorado, according to the AP, they now have set up a hug tent outside of an elderly home, some sort of an assisted living facility. And it is one of the most disturbing photographs that I've seen in the last year, where a man is just kneeling in front of his mother, sitting away from her, just touching her hands. Well, I can't say he's touching her hands. He's touching her hands through 2 layers of plastic. He's got plastic sleeves up his arms, and then his sleeved arms are then inside of plastic sleeves that are connected to this plastic drape that is separating him from his mother. And you can't even really see through this. I mean, it's not opaque, but it's also not transparent either. It looks like it's
translucent.
It is foggy.
It is foggy.
It's very, very bad, and it's just absolutely terrible.
As foggy as your average cop's understanding of the Constitution.
It applies a nice Gaussian blur.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very, very disturbing, and if you want to comment, you're welcome to join us here at 603-283-6160. But yet people are praising this. People believe this is good, that this is positive, and...
Well, it's better than nothing.
It is.
But it's not as good as freedom.
No, it's absolutely disturbing. Let's go to your calls, though. Your thoughts are welcome. You can bring up anything you want. We've got Michael calling from Nevada. You're on Free Talk Live. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you for listening to my call.
Certainly.
I have the solution for the military for the transgender problem that's facing them.
Now, what is the problem, sir?
Pardon?
What's the problem, just to be clear?
Oh, the problem is how to handle it. Like on a ship, on a Navy ship, you got transgenders. They wouldn't know what shower to go in, whether it's the men's or the women's, and there would be mixed genders in
I would
the
say it
showers.
would probably
and so
be
on.
whatever
That's one
gender they
example.
identify as.
Pardon?
I would say it'd probably be whatever gender they identify as.
Well, I want to hear Michael's solution. What do you think should happen?
Okay, the solution should be they're approaching from the wrong attitude. It should be that they should be elevated to a premier status and have their own corps. Because if they're elevated above that of the Marine Corps even, then they shall be part of the first wave to attack the enemy in case of combat. And that solves the problem.
See, I disagree. I liked the old policy. I think that America's gays are too precious to risk in combat, and I think that they should be carefully
permanently
protected.
banned.
No, I'm lying. I don't think that. I kind of like Robert Heinlein's solution. And that is, we're a military unit and we deal with some things that most people don't deal with. So they had a single shower room and men and women used it together and it didn't matter. And you got used to it, and they had sufficient esprit de corps that if you tried to touch somebody who didn't want you touching them, the other people in your unit would kill you, and that solved that problem.
No, you didn't understand what I'm saying. Let me explain it. When transgenders are the part of the first wave to attack the military, all of a sudden, they will decide whether to be male or female. If they really are a male, they'll say, well, look, I don't want to be the first wave to attack the enemy, so I'm going back to what I originally was. See?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you want to put them in a very stressful situation in the belief that their fear
No.
Well,
no,
I mean, if they joined the military because they're willing to fight and risk their lives, then it sounds like somebody who is really gung-ho might say, well, I'm going to be transgender so I can go in the first wave. So it might push people both ways.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I don't agree with your solution. I don't think it's going to work, sir. I think it's better just to stop worrying about gender at all in the military.
Scott, you were in the military, right?
Yes, I'm going to affirm what nobody's saying here. When I was 15 is when the trade towers were attacked, and I was fed the propaganda. I believed the lies. And when I went to enlist into the Marine Corps, I scored high enough on the ASVAB to where I did not have to be infantry. But I believed in it so much that I selected to be infantry because I wanted to be on the front lines fighting. So all you're going to do there is create an incentive for psychopaths to go
throw a wig on and all right, put me on the front lines.
So you'll have clingers being clingers, but for the opposite reason. If you remember Corporal Klinger from MASH. I think we understood you,
we understood you, Michael. Now, I have a question for you. You do sound on the upper side of your years. How old are you?
Oh, 82.
82.
Oh,
so
wow.
I would like to ask the question, nobody, that you were sort of asking about this hug tent situation. If you were in a situation... Go ahead.
I didn't ask any questions about a hug tent.
I know that.
No,
We're going to ask you. We're going to ask you a question about it.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So were you listening when we were talking about the hug tent?
Just barely. I was trying to get my phone number and my information when I call you.
Okay.
Because I know you only allow a few seconds, and I wanted to do away with the superficial niceties.
That's good. It's always good to do away with that. I support that. So there's a situation where certain elderly folks in your age range are being kept in these, elderly homes, and they're being told that they're not allowed to have physical contact with their loved ones. If you were in a situation like that at age 82, quote unquote, due to COVID, that's the excuse for all this, and your grandkids or your son or daughter, your loved ones, your family members wanted to come visit you, and you had the choice to actually hug them, to actually be able to touch them, or to go into this hug tent where there would be a large sheet of plastic in between you and then try to have some sort of an awkward hug with plastic sheets and plastic sleeves on your arms, what would your choice be?
My choice would be that grandparents should not be separated at all from the rest of the family because they can babysit their family and let the two young couples go on and to dances and movies and so on, and they can babysit the grandkids for free, and they'd love to do that, and it wouldn't cost them anything. And that's what primitive cultures do, such as in Mexico and China and other nations. America is unique as they separate the grandparents from the rest of the family and isolate them in a home. It's the worst thing they can do.
So then you would support. So
torture.
just to be clear, you would support actually giving a real hug to your grandchildren and your children. You wouldn't want to be hidden behind some curtain. Is that right?
That's correct.
Very good, Michael.
Right.
Thank you for the call tonight. I appreciate hearing from you. 603-283-6160 is our number. You can bring up what you want. Mike is in Maine. Mike, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Yes. It's interesting you bring up that subject. I was with my 82-year-old father today.
Oh, really?
I gave him a hug, and I gave my mother a hug.
Like a real hug?
And,
you gave him a real hug?
Oh, yeah.
That's good. And they weren't afraid of you.
No, it's out of control.
Hang on, Mike. I want to bring you back. I know you were calling for a different reason, so if you'll just stand by, we'll get to the point of your call here in just a moment. But it's refreshing to actually hear that from people out there, that a lot of people wouldn't put up with this crazy hug tent, quote-unquote cuddle curtain, as apparently they call them in the UK. 603-283-6160 is our number. We got time for you if you want to join us here. Also, you can call in through our Matrix chat server. If you haven't joined that yet, you can go to chat.freetalklive.com, get the step-by-step instructions on how to not only join the server, but also call in via that method, and then you'll sound almost like you're sitting here in the studio with us. We're going to bring Mike back on the air here. I know he was calling about a different reason, and I want to make sure he had a chance to get his thoughts out. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And, we're talking about the media and how they all say the same exact words every day. And it goes back to the Council on Foreign Relations. I used to go look at the roster on the Council on Foreign Relations. Look at the members.
Mm-hmm. Who would you see there?
You see all the CEOs of the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
All the members of the, multinational corporations that have profited from these illegitimate, never-ending wars we've been in for a long time.
Sure.
And Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, I'll never forget when I saw him say, he thanked the media for 40 years of silence with regard to the New World Order.
Wow.
The Rockefeller Foundation.
So what you're saying is you'd see everyone who's in the club as George Carlin.
George Carlin's club, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of Norman Dodd.
No.
He was interviewed by Edward Griffin. He was put in charge of the Reese Commission. Reese Commission was put in charge of investigating the Carnegie Foundation pre-World War I. This was in like the 60s, 70s when this investigation was going on. So he went to the Carnegie Foundation, asked them for the minutes of their meetings pre-World War I. And in those minutes of the meetings, they were trying to figure out the best way to change the minds of the men in the United States. And they came to the conclusion that the best way would be through war. 1913 was Federal Reserve was put into place, and 1914 was the beginning of World War I.
Mm-hmm.
And then they needed a stable of historians to keep the people in this country in the post-war mentality. And the way they did that, they put the Rockefeller Foundation in charge of this, and they couldn't find any American history professors to sign on, so they went over to England. and they went to Europe, and they found, Oxford and Yale are all about war.
Now, hold on. Before you go on, when you say the post-war mentality, what is that?
Well, they talk about shock and awe, right? I mean, remember, you guys are young, you may not, but...
No, I remember shock and awe from Gulf War I and Gulf War II.
Yeah, shock and awe. I mean, it's all this post... What do they call it now? PTSD. It used to be called something else,
Yeah.
Shell shock.
Carlin does a great routine about that.
War has an enormous psychological effect on everybody involved.
Sure.
My family's been in war. My family came here in 1651. We've been in every war.
In war, no matter who wins, we all lose.
The only way to win is not to play.
Right, you got to break the cycle.
There are no victories.
No, just losses.
The bankers win. The military and industrial complex loses.
Yep.
Wins. The people lose.
Well, yeah, Wall Street and CIA are one.
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street and CIA are one. The Dulles brothers, heavily involved in the CIA early on, were the biggest, most powerful Wall Street attorneys in the United States.
Well, to come back around to what you were saying before about the what was it, the CFR, Trilateral
Council for Foreign Relations.
Yeah, and so you got these media people that are there, and these are the people who are propagating the war, whether it be George W. Bush or Barack Obama or whoever it is we're talking about that happens to be, leading the troops. They're the ones leading the propaganda in the mainstream media, and they want people to believe in war, even though, as you put it, Mike, it's a loser. I mean, war is always a loser because it's always the poor people that are the ones that are piling up, as the bodies, and those people don't get jack from this. It's their lives are devastated.
And it was interesting with Trump when he got in, and they defrauded the FISA court with that fraudulent document they got from Christopher Steele, MI6 Christopher Steele. And he was after the investigation they went through, they found that he was in communications with the president of the Brookings Institute at the time was Strobe Talbot. If you look up Strobe Talbot, president of the Brookings Institute, his quote is, nation states in the next century will become obsolete. And it's his job to make sure this happens within his lifetime.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
What was he suggesting would replace them?
Hopefully nothing.
Well, it's if you listen to the World Economic Forum, I listened to a conversation between the international settlements, Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell, and they talked to the World Economic Forum. They all talking about this global financial reset and how convenient this COVID virus, I like to call it the China virus, how convenient this is being. We can usher in this financial global reset.
So was this guy who was saying that the nation states would be going away, hopefully in his lifetime, was he saying they would be replaced by some one world government or replaced by nothing? I suspect the former.
Yeah. United Nations wrote the Agenda 21. If you read the book, there's a book, Agenda 21, but now it's called Agenda 2030. They have big plans for the United States. And it all goes into zoning laws, all these multinational corporations are on board.
Yep.
When I listened to this woman, her name was Karen Hudis. She worked at the Bank of International Settlements where all these corporations were on board. These multinational corporations, they have all the time in the world. They have all the committees, all the money. They have the network. They've been working on this for 100 years.
And they are rolling it out hard and heavy during this whole COVID thing, using COVID as the excuse to put some pretty crazy dystopian stuff into place. Mike, thank you for the call tonight. I do appreciate your perspective and the information there.
Billions of dollars in corporate welfare are going to be going out again,
more of them, billions,
along with
billions.
the pittance that's going to go to the people.
I think they're talking about another $1.4 trillion bailout is what they've been working on in recent days. And you can expect
print.
And giving $1,000 each to the people would cost, not 320. 320 million times 1,000 is 320 billion. So that's a third of 1 trillion. The rest is corporate welfare.
Let's give $20,000 to each person.
I say let's give a minimum guaranteed income of $1 million a day, but no taxes. Just print it and spend it.
Can you imagine what the price of Bitcoin would be if people were getting $1 million a day?
Oh, that's
exactly what I imagined before I made that recommendation.
Yeah. I don't even know how you say that many zeros, but it would be a lot of zeros that would be added to it, I suspect. 603-283-6160.
Well, I don't know about Bitcoin itself, but Bitcoin Cash would go through the roof.
603-283-6160 is our number. Hour number 3 is on the way. Well, one of the things that they're doing to make things more dystopian and crazy is taking away all of the fun. We'll tell you what Mardi Gras is going to look like coming up. 603-283-6160. In the studio with you tonight, you've got Ian.
The rock upon which authority stubs its toe.
And Scott.
So you can bring up anything you want here. We've got more to talk about with the crackdown coming to the French Quarter and all of New Orleans in the next few weeks, with bars being ordered closed citywide for Mardi Gras. They're going to close all bars starting on the Friday prior to Mardi Gras and keep them closed all the way through Ash Wednesday. They are saying here that not only that, but they're going to have police in large numbers in the streets, including checkpoints in the streets. We talked about this for a long time. They could put checkpoints in people's streets, and people just don't believe that it can happen here, and it's happening here.
And that's so advanced. I mean, in other countries where they have this, you have to pay the guards off in cash. So they're cash points they have in the streets. But here we have checkpoints.
Nice.
So they will allow the traditional restaurants to remain open, but they will be prohibited from serving go cups, meaning that customers will not be allowed to leave the premises with a to-go cup.
So they have
alcohol.
to huddle there together, somehow more socially distanced that way.
Yeah. Don't let them go outside and spread out. Let's force them all into one building.
Yep.
Bar owners had mixed reactions on Friday to the news, with some praising, and by the way, this report from NOLA.com, with some praising the mayor for prioritizing residents' health over tourists' enjoyment, and others decrying the income they would lose as a result. I mean, this has to be the biggest week of the year, right? I mean, there's no doubt that if you're in the French Quarter or near the French Quarter, I mean, the Mardi Gras is it. That's your reason for existing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you probably make more money that week than a good chunk of the rest of the year. Absolutely. I'm guessing. I'm just guessing. I mean, I'm not in the business.
So how many of those businesses are going to cease to exist?
Good question.
As a result of this, how many places that have been there for 100 years
this is their Black Friday
there for 101?
How many people would even be traveling for this? I mean, given how many Americans are just voluntarily staying home, voluntarily afraid to go out.
I don't know if that's the type of person who goes to Mardi Gras, though. I'm thinking
that's a good point.
Mardi Gras goers are probably of the,
less cautious.
They probably carry testicles with them when they travel.
I still bet their numbers are going to be down. I mean,
their numbers would be down.
Look at Burning Man this year. I mean,
my God.
Yeah. I mean,
3,000 people went out there and did a real Burning Man.
That's true.
3,000 people still showed up, but it was much smaller.
Oh, yeah.
It was smaller, but I bet it was the most real Burning Man they've had in a long time because it filtered out all the phonies.
Yeah, that's what they were saying, actually. The people that did go were saying that it was a lot like the old school.
Nice.
And we had kind of the same experience at Fork Fest. It was a lot more.
Well, Fork Fest has always been like the old.
Well, yeah, but we had I guess let me say it differently. We had kind of the same experience at Pork Fest,
the Porcupine
where it was
Freedom Festival,
a lot more like old school Pork Fest.
That's true, because a lot of the cowards were filtered right out.
Yeah,
a lot
the
of the
Dennis Goddards
right.
and the the weak and the cowardly were filtered right out.
You know, you mentioned that guy's name since you brought him up. He's a former listener of Free Talk Live, former supporter actually.
Turned lunatic.
Free Talk Live. He has lost his marbles. And this was several years ago, actually more than a decade ago. He started to turn against the activists in Keene because he didn't like the outside the system, civil disobedience, direct action activism. He thought all activism needs to be political, and he was very upset about that. And then he got even more upset when I had a teenage girlfriend. For whatever reason, he was quite obsessed over that, calling me a rapist.
And we're not talking 14, we're talking 17.
Yeah, well, she was 16, but 17, but you know,
and 18 and
calling
19.
me a rapist over that, and then last year calling everybody who would not wear a mask a manslaughterer. Because, and then saying that he believes he has a right to shoot anyone who's not wearing a mask that comes in his vicinity.
When we did the 420 rally this year, like April 16th or something on Facebook, he posts this thing saying he's going to come out to the 420 rally and fire a rifle over our heads.
Did he come out? I don't recall him being there.
He did not show up.
Yeah,
he did not show up. He also wanted to fight me. He didn't show up for that either. But hey, if you're listening, Goddard, I'm here for you if you want me.
Now he was saying the reason I continued this discussion was or brought it further was because he's been saying that he's going to go to Porcupine Day. And he is going to out every single attendee. Now, for the listeners that don't know, Porcupine Day...
This is a guy who doesn't have the courage to leave his own house.
Yeah. He is saying that anyone that goes to this Porcupine Day event, which is what's happening in New Hampshire tomorrow, there's a special... the Free State Project has this 5-year celebration where there was, in February of 2016, the Free State Project reached 20,000 members. And for those that don't know, the Free State Project is a migration of libertarian types to move to New Hampshire. Nobody, you and I, the reason that we are here is because of them.
It's true.
This migration, this project is a great idea. And so anyway, they had the 5-year window in which the 20,000 signers had to move to New Hampshire. And well, now that window is over. As of tomorrow, the celebration closes that window. That doesn't mean you can't move. Obviously, you want to, if you're going to move tomorrow, you should still move tomorrow or next week or whenever. Yeah. But the official window is closed, and so they're just having a celebratory kind of get together. There's going to be a movie that they're showing, I think, about Walter Williams or something like that. And afterwards, there's going to be
sadly just died.
Yeah, there's going to be a party afterwards, and Dennis Goddard. This guy we were just discussing, this man who has lost his mind, has posted publicly that he intends to out every attendee of this particular party, especially the board members of the Free State Project and I believe the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, for supporting this event because, again, in his mind, it couldn't happen without the board of directors' support. So he's saying that he's going to out them at every grocery store, every public community bulletin board, every place. He's going to post their photograph. He's going to post.
Well, good, because then people will know who to talk to if they're looking for a party. And he needs to put me on that list and make sure he gets my phone number. So if you're looking for a party in New Hampshire, you call me. I don't know where they are, but I'll have one if I get enough calls.
Yeah, and I think he actually reduced his claim because he originally had said that he was going to out everybody, but then I saw a video that someone linked on our chat room over at the Matrix chat at matrix.lrn.fm. But he put up a video, which was, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I went to the part they specified, where he then said he was going to out only the board members, it sounded like. So originally it sounded like he would have had to have come to the event and take photos of everyone coming in. So I don't think we're going to see him.
So this way he doesn't have to leave his house and, have the courage to, be around humans.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see him tomorrow. That's my prediction. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he does if he decides to do something.
It will be interesting to see, but I expect all talk and again, if you're listening, you promised to fight me long before you promised to do any of this other stuff. So come on, Dennis, come and visit me.
And you will be there, right?
I will be there. I will be there with bells on. And my legs are all broken because I've been sitting on my butt for a year. So if you think you can take me, this is the time.
Officers, by the way, in New Orleans will be at every intersection, according to the police superintendent, along Bourbon Street and Frenchman Street, and will allow only residents, restaurant patrons, and those looking to shop the streets and hotel guests through. So they will be questioning everyone, apparently. We got more
Mardi Gras ever.
Yep, it's going to be awful. Free Talk Live. You dial toll-free. Nope, you don't dial toll-free. It's not a toll-free number anymore. 603-283-6160. That's the number, 603-283-6160. With you tonight, you've got Ian.
Nobody.
Scott.
We're going to go back to your calls and your thoughts. And then coming up, what do the military families out there think about the coronavirus vaccine? Because right now, apparently, the military is being assigned, at least some of the active duty members of the military, to COVID-19 vaccination centers. So military troops are going to be on the ground in the United States handing out vaccines, apparently.
Why do you need trained killers to deliver medical care?
That's a good question.
That's not their job.
And I don't know if they're going to actually be doing the shooting of the vaccines. They'll probably just be standing around and doing, I don't know, watching, or I don't know what they're going to do. Carrying
of course,
boxes.
if it's going to be forced vaccination, then they're going to need to do some shooting.
They'll probably hold people down, strap them down, that kind of thing. But let's go first to your calls and thoughts. David in New Mexico, you're on Free Talk Live. Hello, David.
You were talking a while back about those programs like we got the Great Reset, and we got the Green New Deal, and we got the Great Society, and we got the New World Order, and we got the New Deal. And are there more?
I'm all dealed out.
As long as we have any freedom left, they'll always have a new thing to impose on us.
Right. So I think what you were suggesting is they were using these programs, especially the recent ones, as a way to kind of take over. And I forget the exact words you use, but that's what you were suggesting. One thing I think people miss is I think they forget to view this whole thing, because if you look at those programs, it looks like, over the last, people think of it as over the last 20, 30 years, they're trying to take over with these programs. But as I just read out, it goes back to the last 100 years with these programs. But what I think people forget is if you this nation, the United States of America, which on this program you're not really a fan of it, and who would be in its current state.
I love the nation. I just fear the government.
Immediately,
I'm against the idea of the nation state. Period. I mean, I don't care if it's the United States, Germany,
right, but the point,
whatever other fantasy.
The point I'm trying to get to is that if you were around immediately after the American Revolution is won, you might have been a fan. But the point I want to make is that at that time, when the American Revolution was fought, before the American Revolution, it was the King of Spain and the King of France and the King of England all laying claim to different portions of this continent. And in that day and age, the private citizens really couldn't make any claim to any new lands discovered or any place in the world. That was all the realm of the monarchs in Europe, basically.
Right.
That whenever people from Europe went somewhere, obviously there were already people living there, but if there were no other Europeans there, they just claimed it for their king.
The king. Yeah.
And what happened that was different about the United States is when those three kings laid claim to every inch of this continent that they could discover for themselves, never mind the people already living here, that was all cool with their rules for the way that they lived. But then there was a bunch of just regular people like you and me that defeated a king or two or three and kicked them off of a continent, or kicked them at least off of a major portion of the continent, and took it for ourselves. Once again, I'm ignoring the American Indians that were living here for the sake of the argument. But that was not acceptable in their world that commoners would kick a king out of a piece of land. And so the point is that we're looking at it, these programs they want to use these programs to take over our country. And what I'm suggesting that is missed is that from the moment that we commoners hurt their feelings, these kings' feelings, by taking a continent away from them, they've been trying to get it back ever since that moment. And so this has been going on continuously, not just with these recent.
So wait, are you saying the monarchy is behind these programs?
Yes and no. In most cases, monarchies, because if you remember back in that day, all of the wealth of the world that was European-based and even non-European ones was based in the monarchy. Those were the only wealthy people. So at that time, and then since that time, yes, there have become people that have become incredibly wealthy to the levels of the monarchs that are not royal family. Mm-hmm. So now you have the old monarch money and blood along with the new money and blood that is not royal family based. But
they're oligarchs nonetheless, right?
I would argue that the land is already owned by the kings, just the new kings. Try not to pay your taxes and see what happens. The king will come for you. Well, the king will send his men to come for you.
That's my point. That's my point exactly, is that what you have now is what you have always had. The only exception is that some commoners in the United States defeated a couple kings, and they've been trying to defeat you in return ever since. And that's what's going on. It's nothing new. It's been going on continuously.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And now, as I was saying, the oligarchy is in charge now. Instead of the monarchy, you now have as it defined here, a government in which all power is vested in a few persons or in a dominant class or clique. So the political class and the corporate class. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about.
And they're just the new kings, and nothing has really changed because, as Mark Twain wrote, most kings is mostly rapscallions.
True enough. David in New Mexico, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. But now we're all supposed to be happy because you can throw a lever or punch a Chad, and you're supposed to believe that somehow makes things better than the monarchy.
Meet the new boss.
It would be much better
boss.
if you could punch the monarch.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if I could just punch out of the whole thing and have them leave me alone, but they don't.
Right.
They won't.
No,
We've asked them to, and they just refuse.
Well, Malcolm X wrote that nobody can give you freedom or acceptance or any of those things. Mm-hmm. If you're a man, you take it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was it? I forget who said it. I know you've quoted it before. If it was Frederick Douglass, but freedom doesn't, or tyranny doesn't give an inch or something like that.
Let's see. Power never yields except upon demand. It can come in the form of words or of blows, but it must come.
Yep. You've got to refuse.
And that was a paraphrase, not a quote.
Yeah,
because I didn't get it right.
But the point was made, and that is that you have to say no. You have to draw a line in the sand and not allow them to cross it. And so many people just keep on, that line just keeps getting drawn by it gets pushed back and gets pushed back.
And that's what makes the Free State Project so important, because different people draw their lines at different places. Okay? And if the people around you aren't going to draw the line you want drawn, then you need to go with people who will draw that line.
That's right.
At the place you want it.
Or close to it.
Or close to it, as close as you can get. And so to me, gathering in certain places and letting the rest of the country go to hell is the only solution.
I'm okay with that. And I hope I get my point across here. But I had a conversation last weekend with one of my friends, and he was trying to explain to me that voluntarism is force, because if we were to claim a area of land, that we would be forcing the statists out of that area and not allowing them to tax us through force. So we are not a system of peace.
That's okay, because they get 49 whole states. And
it didn't make sense to me.
One.
I'm like, you don't.
So let them go do their thing in their states.
Yeah, I was like, what makes you think you have the right to force money out of our pockets. Like, it's not a natural.
It's a strange way to define force. I mean, the idea that we would take over and then leave you alone is somehow force.
There is force involved in that. Eventually, you must forcibly
defend
yourself against the people who come to kill you because
it just
you
sounds
didn't
like
do what you
self-defense
were
to me.
told.
Yeah. More coming up here, 603-283-6160. Free Talk Live. More time for you to join us here if you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. In the studio tonight, you've got Ian.
Nobody.
And Scott.
Scott, I know you had dug up a quote. I don't know if you still have it on your phone or whatever. It was Russell Okung, I think was his name. He was the...
I believe he's for the Carolina Panthers.
He's the football player that made news recently because he was actually demanding that he get paid at least partially in Bitcoin. And the football team actually went ahead and acceded to his demands.
I believe 50% of his income.
Yeah, they're paying him in Bitcoin now, which is amazing. And he's been quite vocal about advocating for cryptocurrency. And I know you wanted to share the quote that you wanted to share.
Yes, in 2016, you're
good. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
In 2016, the World Economic Forum, what's her name? I don't know.
They're awful. It's an awful
One
group.
of their awful
They're like
people,
the CFR.
One of their awful people said, "You will own nothing and you will be happy," as nobody quoted earlier. And in response to that, Okung said, "We will own everything and you will let us."
Nice.
Meaning not the Great Reset or that who was...
I think he was referring to the people will own everything.
Yeah, he was he was saying that in response to the World Economic Forum quote.
I see.
We will own everything and you will let us.
Got it. Cool.
Because
I hope he's right.
Yeah, they can't stop us. You can't stop.
They can't stop us from owning Bitcoin. That much is true, or other cryptocurrencies, and that's going to be a game changer in the long run. But what they're going to try to do is crack down on the exchanges. And we're seeing that happening already, where the government gang wants to regulate exchanges, which are centralized locations, centralized points of failure, ultimately, that the government can easily target because they know where their offices are. And these exchanges do business with banks, so they have to use wire transfers. And so there's all kinds of control that the state has over these enterprises. And so that's going to be a problem.
But that control is a function of the centralization of the exchanges. So what they can't control is if everybody running a bodega starts just saying, okay, well, I'm going to take Bitcoin and return and Bitcoin Cash and the real Bitcoin and whatever other cryptocurrency, I'm going to take that in return for products. And then I will sell it to people for cash at a markup. And that's something that could become a distributed exchange. It's not even an exchange. It's just a sign on your counter saying, I will sell you some Bitcoin. And another sign saying, I will buy your Bitcoin for 5% less than I sell it for. And that's necessary in order for crypto to reach one of its major promises, which is to bank the unbanked. Okay?
Yes.
If you're going to bank the unbanked, you have to have squads and squads of tellers. And that can be these guys operating small businesses. It can be guys who are driving for Uber, what have you. We need to get people selling crypto hand to hand and face to face, and that will neuter the ability of the government to control the exchanges.
Well, one thing's for sure: the decentralized exchanges, as they're called, and I don't know which ones are the best ones at the moment, but the so-called decentralized exchanges have taken off recently. There was a news story in the crypto news world saying that decentralized exchanges had their biggest month ever in January. of this year, as more government regulations are possibly targeting the centralized exchanges. It's going to drive people off of those centralized exchanges and into the arms of the decentralized exchanges, and that's a good thing.
Because the centralized exchanges have become as bad as the banks.
They have.
You know, they're as careful not to do business with me, for example.
Yep.
So it's like I buy my coin on the street and I sell my coin on the street.
Some of these the centralized exchanges are actually becoming banks. Kraken, for instance, one of the largest centralized exchanges in the United States, is now a bank.
And what were they doing before they decided that was a good idea? Kraken.
So there's a little bit of news here in the crypto world. Well, there's always a lot of news, but this one I've held on to for a couple of days. You talked about how Bitcoin Cash was the real Bitcoin, is what you said just a few moments ago.
Yes, sir. That is true Bitcoin, because that is what Satoshi imagined. And there is a Bitcoin that calls itself Satoshi, but that's being led by a crook, and I'm pretty sure Satoshi didn't imagine Bitcoin being led by a crook.
You're referring to Bitcoin SV, or Bitcoin Satoshi Vision.
Yeah.
Or Satoshi's Vision, and that's
Craig
what I actually
Wright
wanted to bring
is the
up
guy's
here.
name, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know what his role is exactly with
Crook.
Bitcoin SV, but he is a real questionable guy who is quite lawsuit happy. He loves to sue people that he disagrees with, and he says things like, publicly he makes statements like that Satoshi Nakamoto, who he claims to be but has yet to prove, that Satoshi Nakamoto was against anarchy and was against and was in favor of governments. And it's like, clearly, Satoshi Nakamoto was neither of those.
Well, if
things.
he was that, then he would have had to be an idiot to create Bitcoin. That was a terrible idea if that's what he believed.
Didn't he try to claim that he owned the ledger?
Yeah, he tried to claim that he owned
Yes.
the whole concept and that he could charge anybody who was issuing a cryptocurrency. See, if I don't hold any SV, I've divested myself of SV, and if the Bitcoin SV people want to change that, all they have to do is every time Craig Wright opens his mouth, say, "Shut up, Craig Wright, you don't speak for us."
Yeah.
And loudly and publicly say
I don't know how many of the SV people are in love with Craig Wright and how many of them are against him. I don't know.
And how
what the
many of them
breakdown
are
is.
employed by him is the other question.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But, regardless of what you think about, and there's no doubt Craig Wright has cast a pallor over Bitcoin SV. There's no doubt about that.
So that leaves Bitcoin's Cash, in my opinion, as the true Bitcoin.
Well, okay, maybe you're right about that. But for right now, Bitcoin SV is showing some pretty serious statistics here. They hit a new transaction record, according to ZDNet.com, where they have a test network. The scaling test network hit a new record of over 9,000 transactions per second at one point in January. And that's compared to, I believe, 7 transactions per second in the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah,
Bitcoin BTC.
and that's why I say BTC is just a Ponzi scheme now. It's not even a serious coin, because Bitcoin SV can eat its lunch. Bitcoin Cash can eat its lunch. Dash can eat its lunch. Most of the coins out there can eat its lunch.
What are the fees right now for BTC?
A lot. I was actually looking today. I sent a transaction with a lower fee, and it was $9.
Wow.
So the higher fees are about 20 right now.
Replace
Ethereum's worse, though, as
Visa
you saw earlier.
with us, because we can manage to process 7 transactions a second for only $9 each. What a bargain!
Yeah.
Seriously, guys,
Imagine
forget
charging
that.
more to do a worse job.
Yeah.
It's hard to really understand why people, are so in love with Bitcoin
Well,
BTC.
the reason is because it's the one that grows first, because it's the one that the
first.
Federal Reserve is pumping and dumping.
First mover advantage.
Regardless.
It's not just first mover advantage, I think. I think the bankers are pumping and dumping it to keep us in it, to keep us thinking about Bitcoin instead of thinking about real cryptocurrencies that are of value.
Well, it's on the way up again, and Ethereum is also, which was the number 2 crypto in market cap. Ethereum is...
You keep pumping Federal Reserve, I'll keep shunting it into other coins.
The Ethereum price is going up at to record levels as well. Right now, one Ethereum is worth about 4.2% of a Bitcoin. So Ethereum is also at record highs. And now the fees for Ethereum are even worse in many cases than the Bitcoin fees. So they're both broken.
But imagine if somebody took the Ethereum blockchain, put a new Genesis block in, and ran the same software, but started the value at 0. So you would be able to basically run as many smart contracts as you wanted for fractions of pennies.
I suspect it's that way on the Ethereum Classic blockchain.
Well, even the Ethereum Classic, they split, and so have they expanded their block size though?
I don't think it works the same way with Ethereum. I don't think it's not. I don't know if they have the same setup as
the thing
as
is BTC. There has to be some limitation, artificial limitation on that coin to get the fees up that high.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, so I can't speak to that. And we are out of time for tonight. But don't forget to check out Scott. He's got a show. It's called Conversations About Freedom.
Yep,
you can find it
Apple Podcasts and Stitcher.
Very good. Look for him there, and look for Nobody over at electnobody.com. We're going to hopefully have some good Cell 411 news coming soon, I heard, possibly.
Yes, I've